the categories from the site. I just want to list them so you kind of see. But really, the interesting ones are these. You never think machine. So like Airtable. They don't think no code is websites. They think it's
is that the end users of software are going to be the same as the people making the software. They're going to be closer together, which it doesn't happen. Right now, everyone who makes software is a developer. So if you make software for a specific niche healthcare industry, by someone else and you're just coding things, in the future, everything's going to be so much closer. So it changes all kinds of stuff. More products in more niches, because they don't have to make as much money. Faster problem to solution type stuff. Somebody has a problem in an industry, they just solve it, and now there's a product. It's just going to excel in that way. More informed products, I think I covered that. And then lastly, coders are going to move up the stack. And what I mean by that is instead of an experienced developer with a CS degree coding a website, they're going to be coding something much more complex, something that has maybe like more like security implications, or is like harder, or maybe even like real life, like people's lives implications. There's things that we need real and serious coders to build, and frankly, they're like wasting their time on the smaller stuff right now. That's truly what I believe. So like in the future, we're not going to get rid of coders. No code's not replacing code, but it's going to take that low-level stuff that really like developers don't need to be spending their time on. And so I think if you can extrapolate that out, that's going to have profound effects on everything. And also, just to note, there's a developer shortage problem. This is actually a solution to a developer shortage, because the developer is going to be is going to come do my job now. But really, like,
this formulaic process create a pattern for a manufacturing company to possibly create a steel bar that can be even more advanced and withstand more cold than the previous one?
right. Yeah, I think,
Algorithms.
yeah, like I think it would depend on if someone can input some information and the computer can do some calculations and find, how to make a stronger steel or whatever. if there's a way to do it where the computer can help, then yeah, no code. You would go in, you would create some interface that has, options you could play with. So you could almost like simulate formulas and algorithms, something like that. I don't think there's like something out of the box that's like, no code algorithm creator or like Steel, but the idea of it would be like someone is working with Steel and they want to make a harder Steel or something. They would have the ability, without being a developer, to play with some of these tools and like maybe make some models, or it would aid them in coming up with that answer, I would say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you could potentially advance already advanced materials much easier without having to go through the manufacturing process.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, for sure. Yep. And I've seen actually there's some like more niche software where somebody might make software to do like exactly that, where the end user doesn't have to think about it, like that's their one task. I haven't seen that specifically, but I would say like in the future, there'll probably be software out of the box that just does something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, one more?
So, at the end of the day, who owns the code? If you create something that uses a bunch of different applications,
Yeah.
a specific industry that other companies could possibly use,
Yeah.
do you have the right to sell that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the software for sure, but the high end, what I would call like the professional software, like the high end stuff, because that's a concern that everyone has, they're gonna let you own your code. It's like, the way I think about it is the stuff that people need to do in business and the stuff that people already do, the no-code tools will adapt to it. So that's a thing, like who owns the code is a huge question. And so a piece of no-code software is not gonna get adopted if they're gonna say they own all the right to the code, right? So basically, like it would depend on the software, but the good ones are accounting for that. And maybe, I don't know off the top of my head, like exactly who does what, but I would say I'm confident that the big ones, you own all your code. And really, it's outputting most of the time pretty standard stuff like HTML and JavaScript. And one of the positive things in today's no code versus like the Dreamweaver days is it's not injecting a bunch of proprietary code or a bunch, the stuff it outputs is like open common stuff. So it's not even, I don't even know, it would be a specific case even where that would come into play. But I do think like if that's a concern, it either is covered or will be covered. That's my general rule because like that's what's happening. No code is becoming professional right now.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of them just being subscription-based, right?
Mhm.
You have to continue to pay a monthly fee to have it hosted by them, and you can't take it away.
Yeah.
And that's how they make their revenue, which I don't know if that's still the trend, if it's changing.
I would say that's the overall trend, but like Webflow, you can export your code. So if you really, and that comes into play too, like if you have like a client that needs a lot of security or needs their data on their own servers, like what are you gonna do, if you're paying subscription? So the high-end ones will let you they'll help you set stuff up. Like I know Bubble has worked with people to set up stuff, and yeah, like Webflow, you could just export your code and put it wherever you want. So I would say, yeah, it's being accounted for, all that stuff for sure.
All right. Thank you,
All right.
Drew,
Thanks.
Thomas. As you can see, there is so much that is being determined with what can we do with no code, what are some possible issues, what are some solutions. From these questions, kind of what I'm feeling for maybe future meetups is doing some roundtables where we're actually spending time discussing these things and sharing what we think. That would be really cool. All right, so next up is going to be Dan Meehan. Dan is the VP of some SaaS products. One of them is called Q. Is that how you say it? QQ. I like that. And Everfest. He also has a business with his wife, Ivy, called Twindever. And they offer web and marketing solutions for local businesses. And along with that is a new podcast called Local that y'all should check out, where he has conversations with small business owners about their struggles and their successes and all that good stuff. So Dan feel free to come up and take the stage. And he's going to kind of tell us about his thoughts on no code and his experience.
Thanks, Cora. Can everybody hear me all right? Great. Yeah, so first want to thank Cora and Mark for putting on this event, the first meetup in Austin. I got into no code about a year ago, and one of the first things I did was Google no code Austin, and all I got was stuff about code next. So just coincidentally, Austin joke for a live stream, sorry. Coincidentally, Joe Brown, New Code, put out something on Twitter about starting no-code meetups really globally and sort of quickly took off, and so got connected with those folks, so really excited to be up here talking. And really the main reason I'm up here talking is a couple months ago I wrote a blog post, and it was called Why I Stopped Coding and Started Developing. And it caught the attention of Cora and Mark, and they asked me to come and talk about that. So I want to tell that story a little bit today, but I also want to talk a bit about where I think no code can go and where there's some educational opportunities for people to learn about really software in general and how it all works. So when I started writing my blog post, I was really talking about how no code has freed up some time in my life, got me unstuck on some projects that I was working on, and really has led to the opportunities that Cora touched on, the agency I started with my wife and the podcast, things I don't think I know I wouldn't be doing if it weren't for these tools that have been out. And so as I start, just quick background on me, just because I think it's relevant to what I'm going to talk about. First of all, I'm not a programmer by any means. I don't even really consider myself an expert no-coder. I really started using these tools less than a year ago. I can do a little bit of both, and I think that is part of what I'll talk about. And what I really want to talk about at the end, again, is sort of the educational opportunities. So I learned a little bit of code in high school and college. I could do some basic HTML and CSS. I'm an economist by education and training. That was really my first career, was in economic consulting. So I wrote some code that was in statistical packages and things like that, but nothing ever approaching software or anything like that. Several years ago, I changed careers, moved to Austin, started working for what was then a really small software company, which is QQ, and I'm still there today. It was just a few people then, and now we're up to about 30 people. I've moved over into what I do now, which is product management. So work with a team of software developers and product managers and designers and data scientists. And as part of that, a few years ago, I decided I wanted to get more fluent and more conversant working with the developers that I work with every day. So I went into a coding boot camp, and I got a lot out of it. I learned a lot. I enjoyed it enough that I decided to sort of keep going and do some more self-paced learning. So, I was good enough to do things with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I could build and deploy some websites, and so I was doing that. But the output was terrible. I had a website that was live. It was my personal portfolio, but I was probably the only guy checking Google Analytics and being relieved that nobody found my site in the last week, because it was just something that I did because I felt like I had to do it because I was learning these new skills. I had projects on there that were part of my portfolio that were really just things that weren't solving anything. They weren't interesting. They weren't complete. They were just sort of there because I was trying to learn different things. And so I started to get really frustrated, and I felt like to finish these projects, I had to learn more coding. So I tried to go deeper. I tried to learn React and Gatsby and things like that, and it wasn't helping. I was going off on different learning tangents. I sort of just lost sight of anything I was trying to do, getting totally frustrated, and really I was just basically about to quit and just say, that's it. I've learned enough. I looked back and realized I solved the problem I was trying to solve, which is to get more technically conversant to help myself at my job. So I think in a bit of a serendipitous moment, right around that same time, my wife needed a new website for her acting career. It's ivymeehan.com, if you want to go check it out. And so I wanted to do it for her. I wanted to do something really well, but I needed to do it quickly. And I knew I couldn't do that with my coding skills. So I had seen and used Squarespace a little bit as a website builder. I knew enough about it that I didn't want to use it because it was very template-y and sort of you're in a box in terms of what you can do creatively. I used WordPress once or twice. I never understood how to do it. It was just like personally not intuitive to me, so never got anything off the ground. I didn't want to go there with WordPress. So I literally just sat on the couch one night and Googled, I probably Googled Squarespace alternatives and found Webflow. It was sort of like that moment. It's like the day I met this person. It's like the day I found Webflow sort of changed everything for me. Really just seemed this perfect fit for me. A website builder that sort of gave you a lot of creative control, but also came with templates that you could use. You could inject some custom code to do things that the templates couldn't do or you couldn't do with the built-in stuff. And so really dove in, took the tutorials, and within a week had produced this website that we're both really proud of, and it's online now. And so suddenly felt like really empowered, like, wow, I can actually do this stuff. So tore down my old terrible website, put up a new one on my own again using Webflow, and just realized, well, if I can do this for us, like I can do this for other people. And so we started talking, and we knew we had lots of friends and families that owned small businesses and needed help just getting stuff online, and really not just having websites, but looking at like automation tools, sort of helping what Drew was talking about, your day-to-day life and sort of automating repetitive tasks. And so we started doing that, and just word of mouth, and just really from that decided to start this small agency and now have some real paying clients that we're helping out. And so that was really exciting just to see what like an individual person can start doing for others, but also sort of enabling yourself to, like in this case, freelance and get some extra income. And so that's what I think is really awesome, where this can go for people. And then really just took what I learned from these tools and just brought it back to my office. And so can do things like not totally rely on our developers to get like access to our database, to get in like business data that I want to build some custom reporting on top of, or empower my product team to use these automated tools to sort of streamline tasks and workflows internally. And so I think that's what's really awesome now, combining in both aspects of my life. And so, as Drew was talking about, this space is huge. It's exploding. You know, on Twitter, you can't even keep up with the post about no code. I'm probably on the same 5 or 6 exact email newsletters that Drew is on, including no code list. You see a new product popping up on Product Hunt probably every single day, which is a new no-code tool. There are membership portals and companies like New Code that have amazing tutorials and forums where you can learn, and there's so much support in the community, and there's so much you can learn. But what I'm interested in seeing is sort of how to take this and curate it all into sort of a learning path. Like if you wanted to put your kid in a coding boot camp, or do you want to start them with no code? I'm not sure what the best path is. It may depend on the person. I started coding, learned no coding, and now I can sort of supplement no coding with coding, but now I'm seeing people online that are starting with no coding, doing amazing things, but then starting to ask, I want to learn some coding, where should I start? And I haven't seen a great answer yet, because I don't think there is one. But I think there's a ton of opportunity here for people to figure that out and put some learning paths together. So in a few weeks from now, I'm going to go talk at a local high school about no code. I don't know what I'm going to talk about yet, but I just think it's a really interesting opportunity. Like I imagine I go in there and teach them how. Has anyone used Glide or seen Glide? So Glide is a app builder, a mobile app builder. I think you can do desktop as well, but you start with a Google Sheet, and you basically drag and drop. You can build an app on top of that. And actually started using it myself a few months ago. I had another personal problem. I was getting lots of text messages on my phone leading into the holidays on like group lists, like namely family group lists. And so phone was buzzing even when I put it on, I think, mute, just waking up to like 80 text messages in the morning. So I thought, as a gift, what I'm going to do is give my family a mobile chat app. And so they'll use that for chatting instead of texting everybody. And so really, Glide is this powerful tool where you put your names, your phone numbers in a spreadsheet, and basically can build an app on top of that that they can get access to and then chat with each other. And I think it took me like a day or two to do this. Like, it's an amazingly intuitive tool. So I'm imagining going into this classroom, can I teach these kids how to build a mobile app with Google Sheets, but also use that as an opportunity to teach them, like, Google Sheets is a database. This is how a database powers a piece of software. And this is a tiny stack, but this is how software basically works. So now extrapolate that, to other people. Can you teach them, all the tools that Drew is mentioning, like Airtable? Airtable is a database. It's a back-end tool. And Zapier and Integromat, those are connectors that use APIs to connect software to software. And something like Webflow is really, it has a CMS, but it's like a front-end stack. And so can you start with no-code tools, teaching people a full stack, the full development stack, and let them see what they're interested in learning and then go from there. Do they want to learn databases? Do they want to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? And so I think there's this hybrid world that exists and will exist where code and no code work with each other and give people a chance, whatever way they want to use them, learn how software works, and just allow more people to build software. And so that's all I got. That's just what I think is really interesting about the space, and just excited to be here in Austin, coming to more meetups every month. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dan. Does anyone have questions?
Could you talk about the differences of like Webflow over just a drag and drop versus Wix? Like you said, Vernon, something like you could add additional coding functionality, but what did you need to do that Wix or something Squarespace did?
Sure. I never used Wix, and I used Squarespace a little bit, and it had been a couple years before, so I'm a little bit rusty. So I take it you've never used Webflow, and that's why you're asking. Okay. You can start Webflow. You can start with a completely blank canvas, which I don't know if you can do that with something like Squarespace, where you can start with a template and use different kind of blocks and components and piece a website together. Webflow, you can start with a blank screen and sort of use the tools and it's really based on box model and CSS, and you can build elements and components yourself. You have a lot more control over the design, but then it's very easy to also go in and put in your own custom code. Like if there's some JavaScript function that you can't use in the UI in Webflow, you can put that in there. And like Drew was saying, you can export your code. You can see the output that it's producing, and it's very clean and very semantic. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So when you talk about like Airtable and your back end, Zapier to integrate APIs, Webflow for your front end, are you paying subscriptions to every single one of these things?
That's a great question. I think at scale you're probably paying subscriptions to each of these things, but the good thing about most of them, almost all of them have a freemium model. And so if you're experimenting, you can use all of these, and you could build small things with them, like websites with just a few pages that are not on a custom domain yet. So yes and no, but I think if you're running an agency or you're building a tool that other people are paying for, you're getting into the area. You're having to figure out the trade-offs, the opportunity costs of which ones you want to pay for, which ones you don't, and they all have different tiers at what levels you can use them. So, yeah.
I have a question about perception and that being greater of
Could you hold on a second?
So I have a question about perception. So no code gets a bad rap. Like if you're doing something, and I've got a website I've done in Wix. I've got about 3,000 fields on mine. I can't program Hello World. I can't do anything in programming, but I was able to create the fields and everything else. But if I say my website is on Wix, I know what that means. Corvid is powerful, and I'm able to do tremendous things. But I also recognize that when I say my website is on Wix, it comes with a little bit of a slight viewpoint. How do we take this forward on this no code?
Who's
Perception-wise.
in this scenario, who's perceiving? Like, are you building a website for someone and telling you're doing it on Wix, or just generally the perception of?
So my site is for my programs, and they're pretty heavy-duty programs that'll people will go through for a month or a month and a half. So those that find out that it's on Wix, who have any sort of technology background, it brings up that sort of, oh, it's on Wix. And then I'll explain it is a powerhouse. And they've changed tremendously in the last couple of years to make it a powerhouse as a no-code program. But I still know that a lot of people, either dev types or others, have that previous perception. How do you bring that forward?
I think as long as it's getting the job done that you're trying to do, it's bringing it forward. I mean, I think, yes, there are very opinionated people out there. I think Drew was talking about it. I think there's a sense of insecurity maybe, but I don't know what it is. But I think as more of these no-code tools come out, and there are more examples up there like Drew was showing about the success stories of the things you can do and the things you can do at scale, I think and I hope over time that perception fades away. And again, I think as code and no coders collaborate more and build things together, that will also help. Yeah. What's something I'm excited to build? I have a little pet project I'm thinking about doing. I have 2-year-old twins, so I watch Mary Poppins probably 3 or 4 times a week now. And I have I don't know, anybody in here knows the Feed the Bird song? Story is the young kid, Michael, has a pence, which I had to look up is 2 pence at the time. It's like the equivalent of 4 cents US dollars at the time. And he wants to buy a bag of feed to feed the birds with it. But his dad, who's a banker, insists he goes to the bank and deposits it so he can get interest on it and do something with it later. I have an idea. I want to build an app that's a combination of like a currency converter and a compound interest calculator that you could go in and see what that tuppence would be worth today in your currency with different variables in there. So, actually, I did the calculation. It's worth like $10 today if he just deposited it then and left it. So, as I said, I think in a tweet I sent out a couple weeks ago, he should have just fed the birds. So, I think that's what I'm going to build, but I don't know. As I said, I'm doing a mix of sort of exploring this landscape and trying out different tools, but also not diving deep into anything until I know there's a real problem I want to solve. I want to figure out which is the right tool for that problem, and then go from there. But on top of that, something fun, just more solutions for customers of our agency, and like figuring out unique problems that each one may have. So if we do a website for all of them, well, maybe one of them has another small problem in their business with like email that they need something automated that's coming through a form, or another one has a different problem that a different no-code tool can solve. So I'm excited to see what I can help people with depending on their unique situation.
Yeah, I guess I would follow up to that, given the previous talk, considering that there were 154 different available tools on that one list. What sort of process do you have for sifting through all that and figuring out what's available?
That's what's hard, and that's what I was getting at. I think lists like Drew really helps because he categorizes them and there are reviews, and then just following the space and seeing what people are building and starting to get a sense of which tools solve which sets of problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I follow up to that. Where do you
I follow it on Twitter, and so I think a lot of people use the hashtag #NoCode. And then once you're doing that, you sort of see the leaders in the space. So I've started to follow the leaders and influencers and people who are posting a lot about it and posting what they're doing. And then there's companies like New Code, which is amazing, who's hosting this event. Drew mentioned MakerPad. So companies are out there that have a lot of tutorials and forums embedded with them that you can start chatting with people, asking questions. People post sort of projects that they have created for fun or for business and things like that. So once you start following and finding those things, you really get a sense of what people are doing and what you might want to do.
I've got one story I'd love to tell about no code.
Come on up, Tim. Everybody, this is Tim Klitsch.
And I'm sure I'm going to get a couple of facts wrong here. But first of all, I'm a commercial banker by trade, and I've been in the finance business for 30 years, financing tech companies, but I don't know how the stuff works. I don't care how it works. I just care that it does work and that somebody's buying it and paying for it and that companies eventually make money. So I've been doing business with the builder guys, Tim Magnuson, for probably 20 years on various deals. Probably, and Mark, refresh me, when did my family member reach out to me in a panic? Was that 5 years ago? 8 years ago? Okay, so 8 years ago, I had a family member who is in the litigation support business, and they called me in a panic because they just taken a new job at this company that swore they had a great tool to manage all this litigation business that she was bringing in, and she got there and realized they didn't have a tool. And she had 90 days to get a tool stood up that could support litigation over billions of dollars of assets that had hundreds of thousands of matters that all had to be discreetly looked at. And she called me going, look, you're in the tech business. You got to know somebody that does this kind of stuff. And I don't know how all that stuff works, but I knew the builder guys had a tool. And so I said, well, I can only think of one person that will do a one-off project like this for you and could possibly turn around in time. So I put them together, and you stood up a tool to manage this litigation in 90 days, 60 days. And it worked, and it supported all through this, and it was the no-code tool. And I didn't even know what no-code was at the time. I'm still just learning a little bit. But to your question about stigma or anything like that, my family member didn't care whether it was no code, lots of code, or Greek or whatever. They had a job they needed done, and all they needed was to be able to stand it up for a test, a few days before the litigation window opened and they had to execute. And so I think my exposure to no code has been just on a massive scale of a single project rather than building an app or a website or something simple. And so when I've seen the power of no code to solve a problem that any other company would have demanded 3 years and $40 million and hundreds of people, and did you have 3 people? 3 people solved the problem in 60 days, and no one else could have solved that problem. I was like, hey, this stuff's pretty real to me. And so I think a lot of the image or whatever is more with the tech-oriented people. The business-oriented people could give a flip what the underlying source of the solution is. Just get it done, make it work, get it done fast, and don't cost me an arm and a leg. And no code is the only thing that could have solved that complex problem in my book. And that's all I know.
Well, I was just curious, kind of follow up on my previous question. That seems like a very valuable process. Did that family member pursue that with other legal firms, or?
I got to make sure I don't disclose what it was about, but it was an asset class that had a unique window of time, that had a problem that needed to be fixed, and then it all went away. And so, but the underlying tool could be used for lots of other similar things, but that was the problem. Because it was a one-time use deal, you couldn't justify spending the man hours and, you know, the 50 million that would have cost, but you could justify a couple million, or I don't even know how much it cost. I didn't get a piece of the action from my family members, and I still got a little sore off of that.
Talk about that underlying product. What was it comprised of? What frameworks were built up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Tim, yeah.
I'm a finance guy.
Yeah. We'll answer that in just a question. Before we move on, can I get a big round of applause for Dan, please? Thank you, Dan. Thank you. All right, everybody. This is Mark Magnuson. He's actually my boss, but he doesn't like me to call him my boss. Exactly. So he can tell you we're the ones who actually built that. But I get, okay, well, cool, story time. Anyway, okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. Oh, I guess you can hear me. I was going to ask that, but it's loud. And hi, Twitter. There's a bunch of international friends, people all over the place. That's the camera right there. Just I'm like pointing up. That's what that is. So thank you, Tim, for mentioning that project. That was a long time ago. We started building Builder. Drew mentioned it a little bit in 2006. So it's been a long time for us. We always were no code, so we were building that tool and using it to build projects for anyone who we could get to do it in the first place, like in the very beginning, right? And we kept escalating what was going on and how big these projects were. That project kind of took us on another path. We went, okay, we've got some things that we have to do in here, and we have to do it so fast. We had to like restructure some of our core architecture, because that one we actually had to, I know one of the concerns was who owns the code? I think it was yours. So that thing actually had to be deployed behind their servers. I mean, this is a litigation firm, right? So we had to make it execute somewhere else. So we worked as an agency for 12 years or so before we decided we're going to release these internal tools as a product, and we're just about to launch. So it's called Builder. We're sponsoring this event along with New Code. Thank you, Joe. And we're excited to be, we're from Austin, so we know all about Austin. I was raised here. We're in Capital Factory here on the 5th floor. So if anybody wants to talk about the tech or how it works or any of that, you can kind of think of Builder as it's a website design tool on the front end, so you get full access to everything. You can write CSS if you know it. If you don't, there's a GUI for you. We kind of do the same thing on the back end too. So or even on the front end with code, if you know JavaScript, great. Add your functions in. But the thing is, we ask you to wrap those functions into inputs and outputs so that no coders can then reuse your code without having to understand what that code does. Right, and that's really what makes it possible to do something like these really complex projects. You got to have coders and no coders working together. The no coders get the iteration super fast, and then when you run out of whatever the tool is that you need, you don't have the tool. You say, okay, coder, bring that in for me, wrap it up. Now I can reuse that on this project and the next project, the next project, the next project. So that's kind of the way it works. And we've built some really ridiculously sized projects before, like multi-million-dollar, multi-year projects, all with no code. So if anybody has questions about what's actually possible, what are these limits, the way we decided to prove that there really aren't limits is 3 years ago when we decided to rebuild Builder for launching it as a product. We built it with itself. Not the old version of itself, the new version of itself. So it actually builds, executes, and operates on itself. Our no-code team built the whole studio. So if anybody wants to learn more, that's a lot to unpack. Can't do it today. But I can walk you through it anytime here tonight or another day. We're all here in Austin. So that's it. I don't want to take up too much time because this is a no-code event, not a Builder event. But thanks, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody at Twitter. I appreciate that, too. Good night, guys.
Yeah, so let's see, how are we doing on time? All right, so it's 7:30. we were maybe going to have like a discussion on what do you guys want to see from future meetups? What would be beneficial? We could do something that's workshop style. Do you guys like this, where we have a couple of speakers and then maybe some more Q&A? Thoughts, anybody?
Demos, yeah.
Interested in demos?
Secular studies, maybe?
Okay. I'll make a note of that. Okay. Yes. Boot camp on specific no-code tools or? Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Just so y'all know, because Builder it works out of here, we are planning on eventually having boot camps. I know for us, a big part of our mission is making building software accessible. And so I will be trying to work on creating educational content and all of that. So if anybody knows someone who's really great at videos or stuff like that, please come talk to me after. I'll circle around. Did you have something?
Yeah. Are you guys permitted to do open projects with Army Future Command Center?
I do not know that.
So I would like to see the no code with Builder and Army Future Command Center project, like an open group, and we can.
Mark says yes to just about anything. So yes.
Yeah, I would like to maybe run some algorithms and come up with maybe potentially the outcome would be usable construction models to implement through the Army Future Command budgets to finally start building this spaceport for Titan colonization, intermediary docks, and the space debris removal and everything.
Very cool.
But this is going to be potentially, the spaceport itself can be built between 1 to 3 years, and we definitely have the budget for it. But the other aspect of it could take potentially hundreds of years, and that's the scary part. So we have to
Gotcha.
start right.
So you need some better technology and software to be able to support that.
Well, it's just the wave patterns of the different atmospheric changes that are going to be going on with the different orbital patterns we're going to have to avoid. That alone is going to be possibly millions, if not trillions, of algorithms and trial and error. And we only have, what are they saying, 800 million years left?
I might need to take another science class to follow along with this conversation, but yeah, I'll circle.
I would like to see that. If
Yeah.
you guys do it, I mean, I've been checking the Eventbrite.
For sure.
So I just,
Awesome. I'll get your email before we leave, and that way, if we have a workshop or something like that, I'd love to invite you, and then we could chat. Yeah, awesome. Did you have something?
Yeah, well, I said demos, but so I think there's two sides of demos that would be
Yeah.
interesting. And one is somebody that's working on a project, they can just show us, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is what I used for this.
For
The
sure.
other one would be cool to go through the kind of the no-code list. He has the categories and like maybe
Yeah.
spotlight one of the categories and what tools can be used for, I don't know, CRMs or what tools can be
Yes.
used for computer vision or whatever. But kind of spotlighting one of the categories at one of the events as well.
Okay, yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, just similar with that, workshops would be really cool. You know, a lot of them have freemium models, and if there would be meetups where you get into Glide and be taken through the development of a very simple app or develop a web page on a web flow or something like that, I
Okay.
think it's really valuable.
Okay, excellent.
And I just want to say that I went on the Builder website today.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal in terms of just having a lot of resources, and nobody paid me for that, but
Thank
it really
you.
was helpful because I was doing a lot of research on having no code to produce an app.
Yeah.
Solution to
Yeah.
And in looking at that and several others, that has so much information so that your learning curve, instead of it being like this, it was just like that. So I highly recommend going to the Builder website to get information.
Thank you so much for that feedback. Yeah. We're going to make it just a smidge prettier. Actually, we finagled Drew into being able to help us rebuild the website. So he's actually working in Builder right now. We did like zero training, basically just let him in there. We're in beta right now, so really trying to understand how are people going to get in here? What are they going to get stuck on? What is, easy for them? And so Drew just went in there and has just been learning on his own and doing our website. So it's been fun to kind of watch and get his feedback. But yeah, if anyone else is interested in that, I'd love, we can close this up and talk about that, but I just want to make sure we're talking about no code and not focusing too much on that. But yeah, any other ideas for the meetup? How does once a month sound? Something like that, casual here at CapFac. Third Thursdays, okay? Does that work for most folks? Cool. Okay, all right. Let's cut the live stream. Thank you, everybody, for coming.